I tied the last satin ribbon around the floral centerpiece and stepped back to admire the arrangement. It was perfect, just like everything else about Sophia's wedding had to be. My sister's big day had consumed the past 6 months of our lives. Every little detail, every shade of fabric, every fold of the napkins was handpicked and paid for by our parents, who adored Sophia like she was a crown jewel. Me? I was the one making sure nothing fell apart. Lila, my mother's voice cut through the air like a whip. I turned to find her marching toward me, a look of irritation on her face. Why aren't the seating cards done? You know how important those are. They're already on the tables, I said softly, trying not to sound defensive. I finished them an hour ago. Oh, she blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Well, don't just stand there. Go check on Sophia's dress. She's been waiting for you. Sophia always needed something, and I was always the one expected to deliver. As I climbed the stairs to her room, I tried not to think about how tired I was or how much my feet ached. This wasn't my day, it was hers. It was always hers. Sophia was seated in front of her vanity when I entered, her long blonde hair perfectly curled. She glanced at me through the mirror, her lips curving into a smirk. Finally, what took you so long? She said, her tone dripping with impatience. I didn't answer, just moved to adjust the hem of her wedding gown, which pooled around her like a cloud. It was beautiful, of course, custom-made, designer, and absurdly expensive. My parents had spared no expense, just as they always had for Sophia. Growing up, she got the newest clothes, the best opportunities, the undivided attention. Meanwhile, I got responsibilities. Careful with that, Sophia snapped as I tugged at the lace. This dress is worth more than your car. The comment stung, but I bit my tongue. Arguing with Sophia was a battle I'd never win. She'd been painting me as the villain for years, twisting every story to make me look selfish or cruel. I was jealous when I didn't want to give her my toys. I was cold when I didn't cheer loud enough at her piano recitals. And she was always so convincing. My parents never doubted her. You're quiet today, Sophia said, narrowing her eyes at me. Don't tell me you're sulking. Of course not, I said quickly, forcing a small smile. I'm happy for you. Good, she said, leaning back with a satisfied smile. It's about time you did something useful. I nodded, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. This wasn't the time to lash out. Not here, not now. But as I straightened her veil and stepped back, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd ever have a moment that was truly mine, or if I'd always just be the one in the background, making someone else's dreams come true. A couple of months back, I was folding laundry in my tiny bedroom when the knock came. It was soft, hesitant, not the kind of knock Sophia usually delivered when she wanted something. I opened the door to find her standing there, looking small and pale, her usual confidence nowhere in sight. Sophia? I asked, startled by the sight of her. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, and her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the door frame. Can I come in? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. She perched on the edge of my bed, her hands fidgeting in her lap. I watched her carefully, unsure of what to expect. This wasn't like her. Sophia was always so polished, so in control. Seeing her like this felt wrong. What's going on? I asked, sitting in the chair by my desk. For a moment, she didn't answer. She stared down at her hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. I need your help, she said, her voice breaking. The words stunned me. Sophia never asked for help, not from me, at least. She demanded, she took, but she didn't ask. Help with what? I asked cautiously. She took a shaky breath, then blurted out, I'm sick, really sick. I froze. What do you mean? Sophia hesitated, as if saying it aloud would make it more real. I have kidney failure. The doctor said I need a transplant and I don't have much time. The weight of her words settled heavily between us. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. Kidney failure? A transplant? I don't understand, I said slowly. Why are you telling me this? Her eyes locked onto mine, pleading. Because you're my only hope. You're my sister, Lila. You're a match. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen this coming, not even close. Sophia, I started, but she cut me off. I know you hate me, she said quickly, her voice rising in desperation. I know I've been awful to you, and I know I don't deserve your kindness, but please, I don't want to die. Hate her? I didn't hate her. Not really. I hated the way she treated me, the way she twisted things to make me look bad. But deep down, she was still my sister. And now here she was, vulnerable and terrified, begging me to save her life. What about Mom and Dad? I asked, grasping for an alternative. Maybe they could. They're not matches, she interrupted. You're the only one who can do this. I stared at her, my mind spinning. This was Sophia, the same sister who had turned my parents against me, who had humiliated me at every turn. Could I really do this for her? Why didn't you tell anyone else? I asked. Why didn't you tell Mom and Dad? She looked down, her voice barely audible. I didn't want them to know, not yet. I don't want them to see me like this. Please, Lila, you can hate me all you want, but please don't let me die. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't hate her, but I hated how much power she held in that moment. If I said no, I'd have to live with the guilt of letting my sister die. If I said yes, I'd be risking my health for someone who'd never shown me an ounce of kindness. But could I really walk away? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Okay, I said finally. I'll do it. Sophia looked up at me, her eyes wide with relief. You will? I nodded, even though my stomach churned with anxiety. Yes, I'll get tested. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, Thank you. As she left my room, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, resentment, and a small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this would change things between us. Maybe this would be the start of something better. But I didn't tell anyone else. Not Mom, not Dad. This was between Sophia and me. I didn't need the added judgment or misunderstanding. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was just the right thing to do. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Now being here at her wedding, I was proved wrong once again. Lila, you can't walk around like that, she sneered, gesturing at my simple dress and tired face. You look like a disaster. We're going to be taking photos soon, and I don't need you ruining them. I bit my tongue, swallowing the retort that bubbled up. I hadn't had a moment to breathe, let alone worry about my appearance. My entire body ached, my head throbbed, and my abdomen still felt tender from the surgery. But none of that mattered today. Not to them. Sorry, I muttered, setting the box down and smoothing out my dress. It didn't matter what I said or did. Sophia always found a way to make me feel small. As the morning turned into afternoon, the tasks piled up. I coordinated with the photographer, double-checked the seating arrangements, and even repaired a ripped hem on one of the bridesmaids' dresses. All the while, Sophia's snide comments chipped away at what little energy I had left. You're not slacking off, are you? She asked as I handed her a glass of water. This is my day, Lila. Try not to ruin it. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside, I was boiling. Did she even realize the lengths I'd gone to for her? Did she care? By the time the reception began, my legs felt like jelly, and every step sent a wave of nausea through me. The music was loud, the lights were blinding, and the crowd seemed to blur together. I stood in a corner, clutching a tray of champagne flutes, trying to catch my breath. Sophia, of course, was basking in the attention. She laughed and danced, her new husband doting on her every move. Every so often, she'd glance my way with a smirk, as if to remind me of my place. Lila, stop lurking and do something useful, she snapped when our parents passed by. You look like you're about to faint. Don't be so dramatic. Her words stung, but she wasn't wrong. I did feel faint. My vision swam, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I set the tray down and grabbed the edge of the table for support. Are you okay? One of the caterers asked, her voice laced with concern. I'm fine, I lied, brushing her off. Just need a minute. But a minute wasn't enough. The room spun faster, and the noise became a distant hum. I stumbled forward, trying to steady myself, but it was too late. My knees buckled, and the next thing I knew, I was on the floor. Gasps echoed around me, and the music stopped abruptly. All eyes were on me, but instead of concern, the first voice I heard was my mother's, sharp and furious. "Lila, what on earth are you doing?" she hissed, kneeling beside me. "Get up! You're embarrassing us!" I, I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice barely audible. My chest heaved, and my head throbbed like it was splitting in two. Sorry doesn't cut it," my father snapped, towering over me. "You've ruined the reception. This was supposed to be Sophia's perfect day." Tears stung my eyes as I struggled to sit up, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I wanted to explain, to tell them I wasn't trying to ruin anything, but the words stuck in my throat. I was too weak to fight, too exhausted to care. "Just great," Sophia chimed in, her voice dripping with venom. "You couldn't stand not being the center of attention for one day, could you?" The accusation hit me like a slap. I'd spent weeks, months even, sacrificing everything for her. I donated a kidney to save her life, and this was how she repaid me? "I'm not doing this for attention," I croaked, my voice shaking. I'm just not feeling well." "Well, maybe you should have thought of that before causing a scene," she snapped, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Honestly, you're pathetic." I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall. The humiliation was too much. All I'd ever wanted was their approval, their love. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. And now, lying there on the floor, I realized it never would be. A voice cut through the chaos, a doctor who happened to be a guest. "She needs help," he said firmly. "Let's get her some air and check her vitals." Reluctantly, my parents helped me to a chair, though their expressions made it clear they weren't doing it out of love. As the doctor examined me, I caught Sophia rolling her eyes and whispering to her husband. The anger in her gaze was palpable, as if my collapse had somehow been a personal attack on her. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes and trying to block out the noise. My body ached, my heart hurt, and my mind raced. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was years of pain, of neglect, of being treated like I didn't matter. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd ever truly recover. The drive to the hospital was a blur. My head rested against the cool car window, and every bump on the road sent fresh waves of pain through my body. My parents sat in the front seat, silent except for my mother's occasional huff of exasperation. The only sound was the hum of the tires and the faint rustle of Sophia's wedding dress as she sat beside me, arms crossed, face twisted in irritation. "Unbelievable," Sophia muttered under her breath. "You just had to ruin everything. We had to postpone our marriage because of you." I didn't have the strength to respond, so I closed my eyes and focused on breathing. By the time we reached the hospital, the dizziness had subsided, but my exhaustion hadn't. Nurses helped me into a wheelchair and whisked me away, leaving my family in the waiting area. I lay back on the examination table, numb to everything, as the nurse checked my vitals and called in the doctor. Moments later, a familiar face walked in. Dr. Patel, the surgeon who had performed the kidney donation a few months ago. His warm, reassuring smile faded as he took one look at me. "Lila," he said gently, "you should have been more careful. You're pushing yourself too hard." I managed a weak smile. "I'm fine." He shook his head, his gaze filled with concern. "You collapsed at a wedding. That's not fine." Without warning, Dr. Patel walked out of the room and into the waiting area. I could hear his voice, calm and composed as always. "Mr. and Mrs. Turner? That's us," my father replied briskly. "I'm Dr. Patel. I performed surgery on your daughter Lila a few months ago," he explained. "Surgery?" my mother repeated, confused. "What surgery? What are you talking about?" Dr. Patel took a deep breath, the kind someone takes when they have to deliver heavy news. "Lila donated one of her kidneys to save Sophia's life." There was a moment of stunned silence, and then my father stammered, "Wait, what?" "She didn't tell you?" Dr. Patel asked, genuinely surprised. "It was a selfless act. She never asked for recognition or anything in return." My mother gasped. "Lila gave Sophia a kidney?" "Yes," Dr. Patel confirmed. "She underwent extensive testing and surgery. It's why she collapsed today. Her body is still recovering." I could hear the disbelief in their voices as they struggled to process the truth. That can't be right, my father said. Sophia said she got the transplant from a donor registry. Dr. Patel's voice was patient but firm. The registry matched her to Lila. The weight of his words hit like a tidal wave, and I imagined the shock on their faces as they realized what I had done. My mother whispered, "She saved Sophia's life, and we never knew." Dr. Patel's words hung in the air. Yes, and she needs rest, not judgment. As he walked back into the room, I saw the guilt in my parents' eyes through the glass window. And for the first time in a long time, I knew they understood just how wrong they had been. When I woke up, the sterile white walls of the hospital room greeted me. My body ached in ways I couldn't quite describe, and the events of the wedding party came rushing back. I turned my head to see my parents sitting in chairs by the window. They looked different. My mother's face was pale, her usual sharpness replaced with something softer, almost haunted. My father, normally stoic, seemed deflated. His shoulders slumped as if he carried a new, unbearable weight. "Lila," my mother said, her voice cracking. "Oh, thank God you're awake." I tried to sit up, but the effort made me wince. My father was by my side instantly, helping me adjust the bed. For a moment, I wondered if I was imagining their concern. "We're so sorry," my mother began, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't know. Dr. Patel told us everything." "You should have told us," my father said, his voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell us you donated your kidney to Sophia?" "Would it have made a difference?" I asked quietly. My voice sounded hollow, even to me. My mother flinched. "Of course it would have. We would have supported you. Thanked you. Supported me?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "You would have supported me? The way you've supported me my entire life? By believing everything Sophia ever said about me?" My father looked stricken, his mouth opening and closing like he didn't know where to start. "Lila, we didn't know," my mother whispered. "We thought you two just didn't get along." "Didn't get along?" I snapped, the dam of emotions I'd kept bottled for years finally bursting. "Is that what you call it? Let me remind you of a few things since you seem to have forgotten." I took a shaky breath, anger surging through me. "Do you remember when I was 6 and Sophia broke your favorite vase? She blamed me, and you grounded me for a week." My mother's eyes widened. "She told us—" "I didn't touch it," I said, cutting her off. "She pushed me into the table and broke it. But you believed her because she cried first." My father tried to intervene. "Lila, we—" "And then there was the time in middle school," I continued, my voice trembling, "when she lied about me stealing money from your wallet. I begged you to believe me, but you took her word without even asking me." "That's not fair," my mother protested weakly, her tears flowing freely now. "We didn't know." "Exactly," I said, my voice cracking with years of suppressed pain. "You didn't know because you never bothered to ask. You just believed her, every single time. And I kept forgiving you, thinking maybe one day you'd see me for who I am. But you never did." They both looked at me, stunned and silent, as if finally realizing the depth of their mistakes. I turned to my father. "You always said I was too sensitive. You dismissed everything Sophia did to me because it was easier than admitting she was manipulative. But this?" I gestured to my hospital bed. "This isn't sensitivity. This is my body breaking down because I gave up part of myself to save her, and you didn't even notice." My father's face crumpled, and he buried his head in his hands. My mother reached out to touch my arm, but I flinched away. "I want to ask you something," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "If Dr. Patel hadn't told you, would you have ever cared? Would you have ever seen me?" "Lila," my mother whispered, her voice barely audible. "We were wrong. About everything. About Sophia. About you. We failed you, and I don't know how to make it right." I looked at her, tears streaming down my face now too. "You can't," I said softly. "Not entirely." "We'll fix this," my father said suddenly, his voice firm. "We'll make it right." "How?" I asked bitterly. "By pretending the last 25 years didn't happen? By pretending Sophia didn't turn you against me?" We'll confront her, my mother said, her tone desperate. She needs to know she can't treat you like this. We'll tell her fiancé the truth. We'll cut her off if we have to. I stared at her, searching her face for signs of deceit. For the first time, I saw genuine remorse and a flicker of understanding. Why now? I asked quietly. Why believe me now? Because we finally see you, Lila, my father said, his voice breaking. And we're so sorry it took us this long. I didn't know if I could trust them, but I saw how much they regretted their choices. For the first time, it seemed like they were ready to stand by me, but forgiveness wasn't going to come easy. Not after everything. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said, my voice steady but firm. I need time, and I need you to prove that you mean it. We will, my mother said, clutching my hand. We'll do whatever it takes. As they left the room to confront Sophia, I let out a long, shaky breath. For once, I felt a sliver of hope, not just for me, but for a future where I wasn't the forgotten sister. But I knew I'd need more than their words to believe it. For now, it was enough to finally be seen. My parents stormed toward Sophia, who sat comfortably scrolling through her phone. She looked up with a feigned expression of concern when she saw them. Mom, Dad, what's wrong? She asked, tilting her head innocently. The sheer audacity of her act made me want to scream. My father's voice was sharp. We need to talk, now. Sophia blinked, clearly caught off guard by his tone. Okay. What's going on? You need to explain yourself, my mother snapped, her voice trembling with restrained anger. We know everything about the kidney, about Lila. For a moment, Sophia's mask slipped and her face twisted in panic. She quickly recovered, forcing a confused smile. What are you talking about? Don't lie to us, Sophia, my father growled. Dr. Patel told us Lila donated her kidney to save your life, and she did it without telling us because you begged her to keep it a secret. Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but shut it again, her eyes darting between them. Finally, she laughed nervously. I mean, yeah, Lila did help me, but why are you making such a big deal out of it? I didn't force her. She wanted to help. You begged her, my mother hissed, tears streaming down her face. You manipulated her, and after everything she's done for you, you had the nerve to humiliate her on your wedding day. Sophia rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. This is so overblown. I didn't humiliate her. She fainted, and it's not my fault she couldn't handle a little hard work. Why are we even talking about this? It was my wedding day. Exactly, my father said coldly. You made her run herself ragged, insulted her in front of everyone, and mocked her when she was clearly unwell, all while knowing she'd just gone through surgery to save your life. Sophia shifted uncomfortably, her polished exterior beginning to crack. Look, I appreciate what Lila did, but I couldn't exactly tell everyone about it, could I? It would have made me look weak. My mother recoiled as if Sophia had slapped her. Weak? You let your sister sacrifice her health, her well-being for you, and all you cared about was your image? Sophia stood, throwing her hands up defensively. You don't understand. Everyone expects me to be perfect, to have it all together. I didn't ask to be the center of attention. It just happens. My father's voice turned icy. You've been lying to us about Lila for years, haven't you? Twisting stories, making her out to be the villain. How many times did you blame her for your mistakes? How many times did you let us punish her for things you did? Sophia's face flushed red, her composure slipping further. She stammered, but my father cut her off. Enough, he said, his tone final. We believed you because we wanted to, because it was easier than facing the truth about the kind of person you are. Tears sprang to Sophia's eyes. I just wanted you to be proud of me, she whispered, her voice trembling. My mother shook her head. We were proud of you, Sophia, but now I can't even look at you without feeling ashamed. How could you do this to your sister, to us? Sophia's tears turned to anger. Oh, so now I'm the bad guy. Lila has always been the favorite. She acts so perfect, so selfless, but you don't see how she makes me feel. She's always looking down on me. She never looked down on you, my mother snapped. You looked down on her. You used her, and we let it happen. Sophia's fiancé, Daniel, walked in at that moment, his brows furrowed in confusion. "What's going on here?" he asked. My father turned to him, his expression hard. "Do you know the truth about Sophia? About what she's done to her sister?" "Dad, stop," Sophia said, panic flooding her voice. "This has nothing to do with him." Daniel looked between them, visibly uneasy. "What truth?" My mother stepped forward, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Lila donated her kidney to save Sophia's life, and Sophia manipulated her into keeping it a secret. Then, instead of being grateful, she spent her wedding day tearing her sister down. Daniel's jaw dropped as he stared at Sophia. "Is this true?" Sophia shook her head frantically. "No, they're twisting everything. Lila wanted to do it. I didn't force her." "Stop lying, Sophia," my father roared. "We've had enough of your lies." Daniel took a step back, his face pale. "You told me Lila was the selfish one, that she was jealous of you. But you're the one who's been lying." "I can explain," Sophia pleaded, grabbing his arm. He pulled away, disgust evident on his face. "Explain? How do you explain manipulating your own sister into donating a kidney and then treating her like garbage? How do you explain lying to me about everything?" Tears streamed down Sophia's face. "Daniel, please, I love you." Daniel shook his head. "I can't do this, Sophia. If you can lie about something this big, what else are you lying about?" "Daniel, no," Sophia sobbed, reaching for him, but he turned and walked away without another word. My parents stared at her, disappointment etched into their faces. My father spoke, his voice heavy. "We're done, Sophia. We won't support your lies or your selfishness anymore. You're on your own." Sophia collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably as her world crumbled around her. My parents left without another word, their faces grim. For the first time, they truly saw the damage Sophia had caused. And for the first time, I felt the weight of years of injustice start to lift. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the two packed suitcases on the floor. It felt surreal. For years, I'd lived in the shadow of my sister, Sophia, always hoping things would change. But now, I was done hoping. It was time to move forward. "Are you sure about this, sweetie?" my mom asked from the doorway. Her voice was soft, tentative, almost unrecognizable from the sharp tone she used to reserve for me. "You don't have to leave. We can fix this." I looked up at her, my heart heavy but resolute. "Mom, I appreciate the apology. I really do. But I need space. I need to figure out who I am, away from all of this." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "We were wrong, Lila. So wrong. I just want you to know how sorry I am." Her words stirred something in me, but they couldn't erase the years of pain. "I know you're sorry, but it's going to take time. I can't just forget everything." My dad appeared behind her, his face lined with regret. "We'll give you space if that's what you need, but we'll be here if you ever want to come back." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Thank you." The first night in my tiny new apartment was both terrifying and liberating. The place was small, a single room with peeling wallpaper and a drafty window, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I threw myself into job hunting, determined to prove that I was more than Sophia's overshadowed sibling. I wasn't sure where to start, but I dusted off my old resume, updating it with whatever I could. Then I applied everywhere, from boutique shops to office admin roles. Rejections came fast and furious, each one hitting me like a blow. But I didn't let them stop me. I reminded myself that this was just the beginning. After weeks of searching, I finally landed a job as an assistant at a small graphic design firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. The people at the firm were kind. My boss, Carla, was a creative whirlwind who appreciated my organization skills and quick thinking. "You've got potential, Lila," she told me one day, handing me a coffee. "Stick with it, and you'll go far." Her encouragement lit a spark in me. I started taking night classes to learn design software, hoping to climb the ladder. It felt good to focus on something I loved, something that was entirely mine. Outside of work, I slowly began to build a social circle. My coworker, Maya, invited me out for coffee one afternoon, and we hit it off immediately. Over time, I met her friends, who welcomed me with open arms. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued me for who I was. My parents called often, leaving messages when I didn't pick up. They were persistent, their voices heavy with regret. Lila, it's Dad. Just wanted to check in. We miss you. Call us when you're ready. Hi, sweetie, my mom said in another voicemail. I know we don't deserve it, but I hope you'll let us be part of your life again someday. I wasn't ready to face them yet, but their words didn't sting like they used to. I could tell they were genuinely trying, and that was enough for now. As the weeks turned into months, I began to feel like a different person. My work was fulfilling, my friendships were growing, and my confidence was returning. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by my family's dysfunction or Sophia's shadow. One evening, as I sat on my little couch sketching out ideas for a new project, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. We're so proud of you. Please let us know if we can help in any way. Love you. I stared at the message for a long time before replying, Thank you. I'll let you know. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It started with small steps. My parents kept reaching out, leaving voicemails and sending texts, and eventually I decided to give them a chance. One afternoon, I agreed to meet them for coffee. As I walked into the cafe, my heart pounded, unsure of what to expect. My mom and dad were already seated, nervously stirring their drinks. When they saw me, their faces lit up, but they looked hesitant, almost afraid to say the wrong thing. Hi, Lila, my dad said, standing awkwardly, as if debating whether to hug me. I nodded, sitting down across from them. Hi, I said, keeping my tone neutral. The conversation started slow, filled with apologies. My mom spoke first, her voice trembling. We've been reflecting on everything, Lila, how we treated you. It wasn't fair. Sophia always knew how to manipulate us, and we let it happen. We believed her lies, my dad added, his eyes heavy with guilt. We let her make us blind to your kindness, your sacrifices. We were wrong. Their words softened something in me, though the hurt was still there. You can't undo the years of pain, I said, my voice steady, but I appreciate you admitting it. That's a start. Over the next few weeks, they kept showing up. My mom texted me encouragement when I mentioned a new project at work. My dad dropped by my apartment unannounced with a bag of groceries, leaving it at the door when I didn't answer. They even came to a small art show where my design work was displayed, standing proudly and telling everyone who would listen that their daughter was brilliant. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. One evening, my dad handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, something I hadn't seen from him since I was a child. It detailed his regrets, his acknowledgement of how he had let me down, and his promise to be better. I didn't forgive them completely, not yet, but I felt a cautious hope growing. They were trying, and for now, that was enough. Months later, I stood in my small but cozy apartment, admiring the life I'd built for myself. My career was flourishing, my friendships were solid, and for the first time, I felt free. Free from the shadows of the past and the weight of trying to prove my worth to people who didn't see it. My parents had become a part of my life again, but this time, on my terms. We had family dinners every other week, and they were careful not to overstep. They listened when I spoke, really listened, and they never compared me to Sophia anymore. Sophia, I'd heard, had moved far away after her fiancé left her, trying to rebuild her own life. I wished her well, but I kept my distance. As I sat on the balcony one evening, sipping tea and watching the sunset, I thought about everything I'd been through. The pain, the betrayal, and the sacrifices had shaped me, but they didn't define me. I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of peace. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I had built a life where I was valued, loved, and respected. And that was more than enough.